Awesome. Hey, well, welcome to ActiveLX. I'm Jeff Marino, the co-founder and director of human performance at DashLX. And man, I'm so very excited to have Andrea Paulson on here today and chat about the lessons or being in the trenches of innovation and research for the last 20 plus years, which sounds pretty crazy. But let me brag about you a little bit first, Andrea, and then I want you to brag about yourself. So Andrea Paulson is the Senior Vice President of Innovation and Technology at PrimaLoft, the global leader in high performance sustainable insulation. Andrea has over 2 decades of product development. I'm not, hopefully I'm not dating you, Andrea.
No, we were just talking about needing glasses. It's okay.
Yeah, exactly. An engineering, manufacturing, and functional testing experience, and is situated to guide her teams towards continuous breakthroughs and innovation on both data-driven highways and my favorite, creative, dusty switchbacks. She's also on the advisory council for the recently created Footwear Innovation Foundation. Um, man, what a pleasure! And we've been working together through DashLX for quite some time, with first at Saucony and now at PrimaLoft, and I'm just so excited to have you on and discuss kind of lessons learned from the trenches of innovation and product innovation and research. And so
Thank you.
there's so much more. And one of the things that stood out to me about your journey and your history, Andrea, is you started as an intern at Saucony. Is that true? I mean, can you take me through this journey? I mean,
that is very true. Yeah, I started. Thank you, first off. It's really good to be here, and it's enjoyable to have these conversations with people that you know, so it's a little bit more comfortable. Yeah, I did start as an intern. It's probably my villain story, right? Like the trenches, the basements of where they kept interns. No, it was always very. I've always had great leaders and great bosses coming through, and I was able to get my foot in the door in an interesting way. Not interesting, I suppose. I was relentless. And, to go back to dating myself, I wrote a handwritten letter because I didn't get the job I applied for and said, hey, I'll work for free. How about an intern? And, I had the advantages and privileges to do that. It wasn't without a lot of help and teamwork from a lot of people. But yeah, I got my foot in the door at Saucony, and 20 plus years later, I'm here now. I can give you a little bit more of a background on that. Like you said, I lead innovation and technology at PrimaLoft, but my role really just supports the functional teams that are running the material science, textile engineering, manufacturing technology, product development, product validation, and last but not least, of course, is advanced concepts. So that covers both the, we talk about it from an applied innovation and technology, but also the theoretical innovation and technology and what we can accomplish in the here and now versus what we have to ideate on and develop and then gestate. And I think we'll get into this later, Jeff, but thematically, right, engineering is not innately innovation, right? They require different skill sets. They require different mindsets. They certainly can have the same people, but that's the nuance I sort of hope we get to cover today. Perhaps incongruently, I know you asked me to say this, my education is actually in the exercise sciences. So
that's why I love you so much.
It's our tie that binds. It's true. My background's in biomechanics and kinesiology, but my professional background is on the product development and engineering and innovation side. And the past decade really being running the product engineering and the human performance and innovation lab at the running brand Saucony, which is fortuitously where we met. That time definitely covered everything from materials and polymer science to work on bottom unit foams and materials to mold tooling and engineering to cause and effect of manufacturing advancements. So we're often victims of our own success, to the more simple shoe construction stuff. So separately, it also includes that mechanical, biomechanical, and metabolic testing of the physical products. And I think we'll cover some of that later too. But I think as a good segue, it is pronounced Saucony. I like to work for brands that are hard to pronounce, and it's using that as a segue. It's pronounced PrimaLoft, and I didn't know that until I interviewed there. Don't tell anyone, but it's funny. Using that as a segue, though, do you want me to talk about PrimaLoft, or you want questions on my background first?
I think let's double click a little bit on both.
Yeah.
And yes, it is hard. They're both hard names to say. I used to call it, what is it, PrimaLoft for the first,
Me too.
So many months.
Yeah, there's no shame in admitting that. I did it myself.
Yeah, but I wanna double click down on both brands specifically, and more kind of in terms of definition, because I was personally very naive to even the understanding of that there was any such thing as an ingredient brand until I met you. So
Yeah.
can you kind of like give us the kind of the breakdown between product brand and ingredient brands, and how important they are to each other?
Yeah, I apologize. I'll probably get a little long-winded here on the PrimaLoft side, but yes, I can absolutely do that. I think a quick introduction to the unfamiliar is PrimaLoft is a materials innovation company. It's not a consumer brand, so we focus on sustainable and technical performance insulations and fabrics actually. But we're categorized, like you're saying, as an ingredient brand, which means we don't make standalone products for purchase. Our products are adopted by brands to, I'll say, enhance, right, and complete their consumer products for purchase. So I'll steal this line from our head of brand building. Actually, it's likely that we're the biggest little brand that you didn't know you know. I'd argue that most of you probably you'd recognize our brand logo inside of like a cold weather jacket that you already own. Should I have a hat over here? Right. So a little opt-ad there, but we are in footwear, we're in fashion, we're in home goods, some animal and pet products, like we make equestrian blankets and dog beds. But of course, we are in the military, which is actually our brand origin story. So if I could wax poetic a little bit here, PrimaLoft was founded in the 80s, the 1980s, on the shoulders of a product that was created for the U.S. Army, right? The initial product ask was to develop a water-resistant synthetic alternative to down.
Mm.
Goose down is incredible, Jeff. It's like people like me in innovation love to talk about biomimicry, and this is a perfect example of nature having 500 million years to get things right.
Yes.
There isn't much lighter or warmer than down, but it's not without its own like con column, and it doesn't work really well when it gets wet. It gets clumpy, it gets heavy, and it can't hold air, which is what makes it insulative. So PrimaLoft came up with this structure of synthetic fibers, and they're hydrophobic. That means that they have very low moisture regain, and those fibers maintain loft, right? So they're fluffy, they're light, they trap air, and that's spurred the tagline "Warm When Wet." The rest is kind of history. I know that that's a little bit deeper than maybe we wanted to go, but I think it's important when we talk about the difference between a consumer brand and an ingredient brand. I have to sort of preface my commentary that both of the brands that we're talking about here are leaders in the outdoor industry, and I have yet to work for a light fixture company, so I'm totally biased with my opinions. On the surface, it may seem like there's a ton of differences between a consumer brand and an ingredient brand, but most of them are oriented around how the brands interact with the industry. Like timelines are very different, right? Ingredient brands plug in much earlier in the product pipeline. So like, therefore we're actually further to market, just tough for a person in innovation because you want to be quick as you can. But that has all sorts of financial implications, but it also sort of shifts things for the sales and marketing teams. But for my departments, it's kind of business as usual. The organizational structure, they're similar. The medium is totally different. The science is super different. but the
Mhm.
process isn't. And it's still about investigation. It's still about curiosity and creativity. It's still about hard engineering. Um, I
Yeah.
think that I think that the biggest point, Jeff, is that both types of brands need to understand the external effect on the human,
Mhm.
um, from the materials, and then the external effect of the human as it interfaces with
Yeah.
in
And
application, body, all that fun stuff.
yeah, I mean, I think that's an awesome segue. Here at Echelx, we're obviously really interested in the lived experience of humans, not what they're doing kind of in this environment, but what they're doing and experiencing and how they experience the world, right?
Yeah.
And so, if I come from the clinical side of things, historically, and as a young clinician, it was really took me a while, but I found it very important to develop, a philosophy as it related to treatment and those
Mhm.
first principles, and then systems that can kind of facilitate or actualize that.
Yeah.
And so, in that 20 plus years, and now at PrimaLoft, like, how have you established that philosophy, or what are those philosophies as it relates to through the lens of data collection, digital, analog, steam, stem, and then systems, and then obviously the lab component. Like, can you speak towards that? And um,
Yeah,
I
of
know
course.
that's like
No,
a lot.
you hit me with the good stuff. Yes, philosophically, engineering in testing, meaning the design of experiment, is rigid, right? It's strict, it's dry. Um, but innovation requires empathy and discord and flexibility and amorphous messiness, I guess, is the best way to put it. It's like jazz. It's unstructured jam sessions aren't for everyone, but that completely plays into my feelings on product design, and specifically what I was getting on at the end there is on body testing, right, and on body product design. Innovation is dichotomized. It's a constant clash,
Mhm.
and I don't want to get too philosophical, but I feel like I have to, right? I'm sure my colleagues
Please do.
are,
I love it.
are tired of hearing me reference this book. It's called Revenge of Analog. It's by David Sachs. Uh, the book is the book asks a question, right? Why in a time where everything is digital and moving to virtual, are people why are more people shifting back to writing in moleskin notebooks with fountain pens? Why are they shooting photography on and video on film? Why the resurgence of vinyl records? And I know I just struck a chord with like half the people listening. Um, and this isn't an opt-ad for the book either. Check it out. I'm not doing it justice, but his thesis is that it's the connection, right? It's
Mhm.
this human interface with things, and on body product has that interface. In a
Mhm.
way, it's bespoke. It's handcrafted, whether it's machine made in a factory or otherwise. It's product that you're putting next to your skin, and you live in hours at a time, and that creates a deep personal attachment and a highly individualistic level. Um, I guess just using a personal anecdote, my brother's actually who turned me on to David Sachs, and he's a self-proclaimed Luddite. Of course, he's not one, but he self-deprecates. He drives classic cars. He fixes them himself. He wears
Mhm.
wind-up watches. He's that guy that stubbornly refuses to upgrade to the newest phone. But my brother's a cyclist, Jeff. You know
Yeah.
how cyclists are with technology,
Oh
man.
man, they're intense.
He's checking Strava. He's buying his new wheels. He's rotating in components and in kit if it'll give him a performance benefit, right? And that doesn't make him a walking contradiction. That makes him everybody.
Yeah.
That makes him everyone. We all have these things that we're in conflict with, and that are in conflict with each other, but they make sense and they balance out. And I think that's your lived experience, right? That's your
Yeah.
qualitative IPA, your interpretative phenomenological analysis, right? That's that you put the LX in the product design. You know this stuff.
Yes.
So,
Yeah. I mean, I think something that's really important, and I think I think connecting what people feel and say, feel first, how they describe or describe it, or and then adding in, well, what did they do that facilitated that feel or that qualitative response equals really who they are, right? And so
Love that.
combining that and creating technology in the real world that isn't invasive, that's passive, that can collect this information
Yeah.
and then utilize it in a meaningful way, not only to that person, but also to potentially the brand who can take advantage of that information.
Yeah.
It is golden. It also is really hard to do. So
Yeah,
uh,
it's obvious, but it's often missed. Yeah,
yeah,
I think it sounds hokey, but I have to spend a lot of my time. I spend a ton of time like looking at behavioral psychology
yes,
more than you think, right? And I often say that we have to be a Rosetta Stone in our departments because first to bounce back and forth between the empirical and anecdotal data, right? Like that's its own thing. And then second, to translate or communicate those like highly technical concepts
yeah,
to the more dilettante, I don't know, stakeholders, right? And it's not super unique or nascent thinking. It's not, but it's why I think engineering and innovation, it can't simply be lumped together. There's a lot more to it, and a lot more to the data filters and fishing. Yeah.
yeah, and that something to be said as it relates to that translational science, right? The ability to take something very complex and translate it into simple and meaningful words or ideas that can then in turn create meaning for someone else or be beneficial is what is wonderful, what you get to do for the last 20 plus years. But
Yeah.
um that's the art and science of it, and those two things should always be lumped together. I think
Yeah.
this is also another great segue into kind of the evolution of data collection, which has been accelerating probably over the last 10 years, but more so even over the last 2 to 5 years. Um,
Yeah.
the idea that context is everything, and I think for me as a clinician, this was really frustrating early on because when I have someone face to face, there's this beautiful relationship that's occurring, and but once they left, which was 90% of the time, they weren't in the confines of my four walls, then I had no idea what they were doing, what they were feeling. I didn't have access to that, or the technology that wasn't available there. Um, so kind of going from a lab where we have small tests, or in the field where there's small tests occurring, to maybe a democratization of or scaling that to the
Yeah.
real world where every consumer becomes a tester to a certain extent. That hasn't become reality yet, but that's pretty exciting. What are your thoughts on that, and how is that changing the way R&D and product validation happen on your end?
Oh man. Yeah. I mean, it is the meat and potatoes of our discussion. I think.
Yeah.
I think of it as like lab first, system second, like the actual physical, and then the digital. Um, from a lab perspective, PrimaLoft has an ISO certified lab in house. That just means I think it's International Organization of Standards, or ISO. I'm spacing on that, but it's a third party audit, right? And the the certification just means that any research done within our walls is validated and recognized, right? And that it's collected using endorsed standards. And yeah, sure, that helps us with reputation and credibility. I don't mean to be flippant about it, but it also affords us speed and a pre-filter to our results. So
Mhm.
obviously, products still need third-party validation, but we can easily transition from like that quick and dirty prototyping into like a more commercialized effort. And that's sort of my lead in on the topic of data collection, right? Like how innovation uh, cannot happen without the data. It can't.
Mhm.
So how we innovate around the data collection directly correlates to how well we innovate, period. And that's super important. Like, it's pretty obvious too, but shockingly undervalued. And like you have already said, I don't want to preach to the choir on that. But okay, so systems wise, right? Obviously, Saucony had much more exercise science equipment, right? We had instrumented treadmills, metabolic carts, high-speed video, markerless motion capture, a lot of fun toys. Whereas PrimaLoft centers its focus on the thermals in the airflow analysis. So things like countertop climate chambers, sweaty guarded hot plates, which measure CLO. CLO value is basically the insulation currency, right? It's a measurement for thermal insulation for apparel and garments. And for the more agnostic listeners, as a reference point, it's like R value for materials. So it's a direct correlation, actually. Similarly, like we have HFMs, which are heat flow meters. Those are going to measure thermal conductivity of materials, right? We have MVTR, which is moisture vapor transfer rates. These are basically like air, vapor, moisture effects of the product. And dude, we do help with laundry. Something I didn't know. We do a lot of laundry, right? You would not believe how much laundry we get into. There's a lot of laundry science and things like chlorine and pH balance and water softeners and surfactants. Like, I don't mean to go down this rabbit hole, but like, it makes a ton of sense when you think about it, right? Like, it's obvious that chemistry would be involved, but like, people have to think about it, and most people don't. It's highly technical, majorly important, a little less sexy for the layperson. Sorry, squirrel. So, if we look at both companies having these expensive toys, in terms of like crossover, machinery between the labs, PrimaLoft and Saucony all use UTMs, right? Like universal testing machines, instrons. It's pretty, stress strain curves are ubiquitous across the medium in all sorts of material development. We have fabric testing. We have FLIR cameras, forward-looking infrared. Both have these numerous hardware and software systems for general lab study, but it's these in-field testings, of course, which is why we're talking, including -LX. But I think the difference for the -LX data is super dramatic, right? It's how they get used. It is totally different data. And, Saucony was using -LX to collect biomechanical and kinesthetic data and, variables and gait measurements such as like pace and cadence and stride length and flight time, and some of the force and power readings. That data is really mainly human outputs, whereas at PrimaLoft, the script is totally switched. Like we use the -LX API pulls as inputs. That's kind of where I want to go with this conversation is like, why is that important to us, right? Like at PrimaLoft, the climate is required for wear testing, right? It's sort of an afterthought for a lot of the Saucony testing. So we work to take the ambiguity out of the equation, right? Like testers don't have to remember or guess or hunt down any of their conditions during their activities. They're incredibly poor and unreliable witnesses. Keep a food diary. You'll find out.
That's been studied significantly. Yeah.
So your software is using the smartwatch GPS, as I wear my wine watch, to grab the GPS data for us and directly input the weather reporting. So here's why that's super important for me and my teams. For thermophysiology and thermodynamics, in our research, everything we do involves two microclimates. So the microclimate you're in, and then the microclimate you create. So you can even call it your nanoclimate if you want. So if you're outside, you are in a microclimate. It's temperature, precipitation, wind speed, UV index, and elevation. Against your body, you have the more smaller localized nano environment. That's temperature, humidity, airflow, UV index, and elevation. Now, I swapped out two of those words, and it's not simple semantics, right? Like the difference between precipitation and humidity and wind speed and airflow are categorically important when we're trying to calculate the effects of the garment onto the human physiology. So the precise data collection and the delta between those two environments on a second by second basis is what allows us to really clearly understand the cause and effect between the two climates. It's really fascinating.
Yeah.
It's really deep information, and we wouldn't be able to collect it without your software and the hardware plugins.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that, Andrea. I mean, I think that that difference that you described is really interesting because in the lab where it's controlled, it can be very specific. Um, you're developing questions that then turn into hypotheses that can also be tested and taken out into the real world and see, hey, are these actually occurring or are they not? And what is, like you said, happening in the external environment and then also in the internal environment within that individual, and in between, the space in between.
Yeah.
Super exciting, and interesting, and something that, for us, not only is, yeah, we do that, but there's also the next step to that. Well, you know,
Yeah.
what is the response physiologically that's occurring in X environment at X time of that human when they're in whatever environment they are at elevation or not, at temperatures or not. That's even the another layer below that.
That's why you wear tech. Yeah.
Yeah,
It,
yeah.
that's the value of in-field testing. I mean, it's think about it this way, specific to my problem at hand right now, or our problems at hand. Like wind chill is a formula that calculates temperature and wind speed, right, to quantify the sensation of cold. It's a
Mhm.
sensation. So cold temp plus blowing air, that equals colder skin. All right. Well, because air accelerates heat transfer, right? All that fun science, but it's all about evaporation and specific heat capacity and energy draw. And really, how can I verify empirically that our insulation was better in the cold and rain and withstood harsh wind chill
Mhm.
without supporting qualitative microclimate values from human interaction?
Yeah.
Qualitative, right? So
Yes.
sure, we can do it on a tabletop with sensors, and we can, but we don't have the human interaction part, and we we can do all the human testing inside of a climate chamber. We can do that, but it's hard to collect multiple hours of wear across the various movements, and so it's just in-field testing just captures. It's the only place where you can capture the climate specifics as a holistic snapshot. So it's absolutely necessary. I'd love to have someone argue a counterpoint to it, but
Yeah, and I think at least for us, and it's for our relationship, with PrimaLoft and you, and even at Saucony as well as other brands, it's really, we try to go into this process as a test and learn, right? And just get better. What are the problems that, brands have? You know, how do you scale this? How do you get more testers involved, but in a more passive and efficient and cost-effective way? All those things that, are obviously a struggle. And then more importantly, and this is the tough one, and we hear this often,
yeah,
is, the idea that, more data isn't always better data. And so
sure.
how do we make sure that when we're translating that or giving it to someone, that they can access it in a way that is one usable, but also answers the questions that they have. And that's the thing that we're working to be better at,
Yeah,
and are really honestly more excited about than anything. I mean, I think I'm interested in your thoughts on that, Andrea, because I mean, I'm sure, um, everybody has access to data, but it's that translation piece that is really the key at this point.
yeah. I mean, data is biased inherently always. It's what you do with it, like you said. It's using your quote. It's you are what you do with yourself. Um, I think maybe my my approach is the I'm thinking about it from the athletes, right, or the users. Let me
Yeah.
put it this way, right? I've been really lucky. I've had some really cool jobs. I didn't think it was going to get cooler than making specialized products for Olympians or elite trail runners. Those relationships are pretty awesome experiences and invaluable. They're core memories for me, man. I won't name drop. I'm not that cool, but to be able to pick up a phone and call a world class athlete for their direct feedback and data,
Awesome.
and get them on the
Awesome.
treadmill and collect their data. It's damn helpful, and know it. Beside that, knowing that your work can affect their outcome is damn inspiring, and it makes you proud. But it's inherently biased data.
Yes. Yeah.
So which data you're collecting is important, and I think even more so now. I get to make products that go into thousands of brands, and I enable all of their athletes to perform their best at their activities. So reach and scale is vastly larger, and thus the data is vastly larger.
Mhm.
So what that really means for us, though, is that your value and your brand mark have to be defensible with
Mhm.
data and credibility. And I'd love to, if we had time, I would love to tell you more about our ambassadors. Oh my goodness, my new favorite person might be one of our ambassadors. His name's
Can
Lonnie.
can you share who that is?
Yes, yeah, I know. I'm happy.
Please.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'd be happy to. We have athletes, and we'll call them enthusiasts as well. That are part of our product testing programs. One of them is probably my new favorite person. His name is Lonnie Dupree, and Lonnie Dupree is an Arctic explorer.
That's awesome.
Among his accolades and first, I think he's one of the first people. He's the only person to circumnavigate Greenland on a dog sled and kayak. Um,
That's amazing.
he's currently, I love him. He's so smart. He's so creative. He's emotional. He's wonderful, and he's a resilient human being. He's currently on a sailboat heading into the Arctic Circle through ice floes. And it's I kid around, but like he's not looking for a 2 or 3% boost in metabolic efficiency, right?
Yeah.
He's living on water in freezing temps, and if his insulation fails him, it's life or death. And that totally reframes my relationship with our ambassadors and athletes. But the data, right? Like at
Yeah.
its at its crux, right? Whether it's an Olympian or an Arctic explorer, the difference between the consumer brand mentality or the ingredient brand mentality, the product level, like I said, the mediums are totally different, but the structure, the process, the people, they're all the same, and they all require making sure that you're filtering that data to make sure that you are not building product for too niche of a thing,
Mhm.
and making sure that you're plotting enough of the data against other things for correlates, because we talk about comfort, but comfort can't be blotted without safety when it
Mhm.
comes to Lonnie Dupree. So
Yeah.
I think that a lot of that is talking about your data, your overwhelming amount of data, and making sure you're filtering it for the
Yeah.
use case. It's hard to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, and I mean, this speaks to the underlying, importance of why all this matters, right?
Hmm.
And I think if that that foundation of why it matters, which I think whether it's an ingredient brand, or a product brand, it's really about serving the consumer and meeting their needs exactly where they're at that moment in time, right?
Yep.
And the more I do this, the more I see, kind of taken this idea being taken from kind of healthcare, but into consumer brands and ingredient brands, which is being the ultimate caretaker of your consumer, right? And so reaching out, being able to access them, speak to them, understand what they want, what they dislike, what they like, doing that in a way, that's personal to them and not invasive, and more importantly, just super authentic to the brand and to that individual, which is really important. So I love that
You
example
nailed
because
it with authenticity. That's a
yeah, like it's really a and I think that's also the challenge is to make sure that that's underpins everything that we do as a company, but also we love working with brands like yours that really take that to heart. So that's super exciting. So I want to be respectful of time. I have a couple more things that I think are important.
Okay.
One kind of fun, but what's next? As you look forward at from a tech or frameworks or mindsets at PrimaLoft, how like what are the things that you're interested in, kind of in the next 1 to 3 years, I guess.
Uh, I there's that quote that I keep seeing. I think it's being misconstrued. It's don't compete where you can't compare. I think for PrimaLoft, we have to understand all of our points of differentiation. So why we are different from down, why we are different from our competitors.
Mhm.
That's information we know, but the communication of that is, I think, needs to get louder, and it will be getting louder. And we can compare, and we have the data to stand behind.
Mhm.
So in relating that back to what we were just saying, comfort is this nebulous thing
Mhm.
to measure. It's not really quantitative. It's really hard to quantify, and you can apply predictive attributes, but they're not always binary. Dry is comfortable, wet is not. Okay, temperature far too personalized, airflow far too personalized, elevation UV index, right? It's personalized within a range. This is why we're always plotting comfort against and with safety. And
Mhm.
I think teaser. I think you're going to start hearing more about that and what that means in the seasons to come. And we're going to do a better story, not a better story. We're going to build a story around that.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I mean, again, I was so naive to this even idea, the idea that there is ingredient brands, right? And so, um, you know, not only looking towards the future that you just stated, but also, I think just being able to understand that there is this brand, and here's what you guys do, and it's essential to what the product brands
So
even
many brands.
right? Like
Yeah.
you're in 1,000 plus brands. From what I
Over.
understand, I'm
Yeah.
like, that's unbelievable. And why
Yeah.
haven't I ever heard of?
Yeah. Yes. I'd be remiss to not mention this too. Sustainability is a huge part of
Mhm.
our branding. I should really mention that what's coming is just further leaning into that sustainability
Right.
drive. I told the story about the military, but even back then they didn't use DWR. There was no fluorochemicals, no PFAS or anything like
Mhm.
that. And at PrimaLoft, we are really lucky and blessed to be able to look at innovation through sustainability,
Mhm.
and not sustainability, through. I said that backwards, I think. No, not sustainability through the lens of innovation. I'm losing my mind. The distinction, I think, is pretty nuanced, but an important one when we're talking about prioritization. There's a lot less conflict when you aren't trying to jockey around sustainability for position against your technologies or your margins or your revenue or any of that stuff. So when your core values are met, it's really easy to just move through product and let that follow suit. So I think we're going to do a better job of talking about that too.
Yeah, I love it. And you add, I guess, durability onto that, which is, those two things match together, and it's a no brainer to me.
Always.
So
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. I got,
What?
are you going to take the rapid fire question challenge?
Oh, gosh.
I don't want you to think too much about these questions. I just want you to fire off your first thoughts, okay?
Okay. Yep.
So, question number one: favorite material slash ingredient that you're currently most excited about?
Oh, I can't tell you. And I know
I figured I
it's a
figured that would be the
horrible
case.
answer. That's gonna be a
I, no,
horrible
I, I
answer.
was like, I created that question. I'm like, she's not going to even be able to tell me this.
It's not meant
Okay,
to be
it's
a
a
quote,
pass. Let's
but
go with a pass.
okay. Yeah. It's great.
So,
Do you want me to go? Do you want me to tell you about it?
Tell me one that you love in the past.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
All of the products are great. We have what what I'll tell you about pure manufacturing. I'll lean in on the sustainability side of things.
Okay. Yeah.
We spent the PrimaLoft has spent like the last 2 years basically converting a lot of their manufacturing to fall under pure manufacturing, which is produced using reduced emissions. So that doesn't sound like sexy new product, but that means that we're converting a lot of the product that we're making to use renewable resources and just doing it. We're just
Mhm.
doing it and offering it, and that's innovation on an incumbent product. And I feel like that should be touted and shouted because uh, it is innovation and it is product, even though it's not a specific product. It's an overarching technology platform, and that's even cooler.
Yeah, and I think more importantly, you're doing it because it's the right thing to do, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, and that's it speaks to the brand, it speaks to you, it speaks to everybody that's involved in the brand, and so that's really awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, this is one of my favorite because I'm a running nut and
Yeah,
all that kind of stuff.
I do.
Your favorite running shoe that you were had the opportunity to work on and bring to market,
Um,
and
bring the
then your current favorite shoe that you use.
Bring the market. That makes it challenging too, because all of my favorite projects are on the clipping room floor. That's the fun of innovation. You spend a career
For sure.
batting through under over 300, you're doing well. I think I'm torn. The inaugural endorphin products or
Yes.
the new Endorphin Elite 2 is probably the one that I'm most proud of and excited to have worked on. That shoe is bananas, the Endorphin Elite 2.
It is
We're
banana.
talking about data. Like, people don't even realize what that shoe is capable of. The numbers that it can put up
Yeah.
in metabolic testing, ooh,
Yes.
orders of magnitude greater than like.
Yeah. I have one of my athletes is, as you know, a sponsored
Yeah,
athlete for Saucony, Vanessa Frazier, and
yeah,
she absolutely loves that shoe.
good shoe.
So thumbs up to you and the team at Saucony for creating that. The foam is crazy. I can't even. It's just crazy. Okay, maybe the last one.
Okay.
Right, I get emails all the time, and partially on the idea of because I'm adjacent to being involved in the outdoor industry, I guess through you guys, people like you is they're asking me how do I break into the outdoor industry? Like, how do I get involved in this from PhDs, biomechanists to marketing people, etc.
Yeah,
And my first thought is like, "Oof, that's really hard."
it is.
But maybe someone who's been through it, and I think you alluded to it when we first started chatting through your history, but some advice that you would give those individuals trying to break into this industry.
Yeah. It's hard to get your foot in the door. It's true. I myself worked for free for a few months to just have the honor. It's a very passionate, typically really, I think you already used the word authentic, uh,
Hmm.
incredibly incestuous
Yes.
industry. And that makes it all the much, it feels it all the much smaller actually, because it's so difficult when positions open if they do. I hesitate to give any real tactical advice for getting a job, but I can speak from my own perspectives on hiring. Like, try some things on for size. I like diverse resumes. I don't, more than the targeted ones, perhaps. To me, exposure is experience, and curiosity often can't be taught. So obviously, it depends on the role, but in a more junior role or an individual contributor, it helps to be a specialist. But in a more senior role but something in the innovation field, perhaps. I think it really helps to be a generalist,
Hmm.
and I've even given that advice to some of my own colleagues. Everyone knows the quote, "A jack of all trades is a master of none." But the
Hmm.
rest of that saying is, but oftentimes better than a master of one. So that's sort of where I go with that.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I would agree with that as well. I don't want when probably my answer to them, which isn't usually an answer, it's more questions, but it's really don't be different for different sakes, but each one of you is unique, and so really share that uniqueness. And often I think often people are scared to do that sometimes.
It's a shame because innovation is all about diversity of thought, diversity of
Yeah,
character, diversity of background. So if I'm speaking specifically again to innovation, but it
yeah.
can only help.
Hey, well, I've taken way too much of your time, Andrea. Like, how much I care about you and love you, and I'm very, very honored to have you on here and just to chat and learn from you. And I'm just very authentically thankful for you and our work together so far. So I'm looking forward to that growing and being a part of what you guys do at a continued part of what you guys do at PrimaLoft.
Absolutely.
And I wish you the best and enjoy a little rest and relaxation, hopefully soon.
Hopefully soon. Thank you so much for having me. I really do enjoy all our time always. So thank you for having me here.
Thank you, Andrea. Bye.